On June 11, 2026, a 35-year-old man fell to his knees in tears in front of 80,000 people. Not because he had won a trophy, not because of a last-minute winner. He cried because he had finally done something he had spent 12 years trying to do. Something that 4 years ago, doctors weren't even sure he'd survive long enough to attempt. This is the story of Raúl Jiménez. And this goal wasn't just a goal, it was a miracle. 4 World Cups. That is how many times Raúl Jiménez put on the Mexico shirt and walked on to the biggest stage in football. 2014 in Brazil, 2018 in Russia, 2022 in Qatar, and each time the same result, 0 World Cup goals. It wasn't for lack of talent. At Wolves, he was one of the most feared strikers in the Premier League. Lethal in the air, clinical in front of goal. But at the World Cup, something always got in the way. A manager's decision, a team that didn't create enough, a cruel post, a keeper who had the game of his life. By 2022, people were starting to write the narrative for him. World Cup curse, a great player who would never produce on the grandest stage. 46 goals for Mexico, but none when it mattered most. What nobody knew was that Jimenez wasn't just fighting a footballing curse. He was fighting for his life. November 29th, 2020. Wolves versus Arsenal at Molineux. 40th minute. A routine aerial challenge between Jimenez and Arsenal defender David Luiz. What happened next stopped the entire stadium cold. Jimenez went down and didn't get up. Players called for medics immediately. Teammates turned away. David Luiz was in tears on the pitch. For several minutes, the medical team worked on him as the crowd fell completely silent. He had suffered a fractured skull, one of the most serious injuries a footballer can sustain. He was rushed to hospital where he underwent emergency surgery. His father held vigil at his bedside. Doctors said he was lucky to be alive. For months, nobody knew if he would ever play football again. His father, who had spent a lifetime watching his son play, was there through every moment of the recovery, the pain, the setbacks, the small victories of putting a boot on again, of heading a ball again, of believing again. Jimenez came back. 11 months later, he returned to the Wolves team. He scored. He celebrated by pointing to the sky. To his father, who had passed away during the recovery period before he could see his son play again. Think about that for a second. He came back from a fractured skull, grief, and heartbreak, just to keep playing the game. Fast forward to June 11th, 2026, Mexico versus South Africa. Group stage, World Cup on home soil. The tournament hosted across the United States, Canada, and Mexico. Jimenez is 35 years old. This is almost certainly his last World Cup. 67th minute. Roberto Alvarado whips in a cross from the right. Jimenez attacks the ball the way he has thousands of times in his career. With his whole body, with everything he has. The header is perfect, the net shakes, and then he stopped. For just a moment, in the middle of 80,000 screaming fans, Raúl Jiménez just stopped. And then the tears came. His teammates mobbed him. He pointed to the sky, to his father, to every doctor who said he might not make it, to every person who told him to retire, to 12 years of waiting. His teammate Alexis Vega said it best after the match. It was his first World Cup goal, but it was much more than that. What mattered most was his dedicating it to his dad up in heaven. Football gives us a lot of moments, last-minute winners, impossible comebacks, generational talents, doing things we've never seen before. But every once in a while, it gives us something different. It gives us a man who fractured his skull, lost his father, came back from the edge, and then, at 35 years old, on the biggest stage in the world, finally got the moment he had been chasing for 12 years. Raúl Jiménez didn't just score a World Cup goal on June 11th, 2026. He proved that the best stories in football aren't always about the fastest, or the youngest, or the most gifted. Sometimes they're about the ones who simply refuse to stop. If this story moved you, subscribe to Kick Off Untold, because this is exactly what we do here. The stories behind the game that nobody else is telling. We'll see you in the next one.